Welcome to the Femsplainers. I'm Danielle Crittenden, and welcome to this last in our summer author series. Before we go on, take a little summer break, we're going to be having on Sandra Tsing Loh, who is just one of the funniest women on earth. She has a new book called The Madwoman and the Roomba, My Year of Domestic Mayhem. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we go to Sandra, I wanted to welcome Meghan Cox Gurdon as my co-splainer this week, Wall Street Journal book critic and author of The Enchanted Hour. And Meghan, so good to see you. And you're in Maine, I think, right? Melting in Maine.
I'm actually in Kinshasa on the coast of Maine. It is roasting hot here. And I'm in an old house that has almost no furniture and certainly no air conditioning. So it's, I'm glowing, I think.
You are. You just look radiant. For those not watching you on Zoom, I can describe you as looking radiant, which is the opposite of how we're supposed to be at as middle-aged women.
Yeah, I'm radiant the way that a stick of butter is radiant when you melt it in a pan. I pick up the
You haven't begun to bubble or brown yet, but...
No, certainly not. And don't strain me.
Well, I just had, since we're going to be talking with Sandra a little bit about Roombas, Meghan, before we get to Sandra, I just had a little podcast housekeeping to take care of, or Roombaing, as we might call it. We got some announcements. The first big announcement is that you, Meghan, will be joining us in the fall as one of our regular co-splainers.
Yes, I'm very excited about that. I'm really happy.
I'm very excited to have you. And we'll also have a rotating panel who'll join me. And that will also, aside from Meghan, include The Atlantic's Caitlin Flanagan and also Irshad Manji. She's the author of Don't Label Me and founder of Moral Courage College. And she appeared on the Femsplainers to promote her most recent book called Don't Label Me. But can we just say she's a pistol? She's amazing. And so I'm very excited. That will be our kind of permanent co-splaining panel. I want to also announce that we've nearly cracked the top 100 of political podcasts on iTunes. So thank you for being listeners. It would help if any of you took a few seconds to go rate us on iTunes, because some trolls from our trans episode have been trying to bring our almost perfect 5-star rating down. And I wanted to thank also our supporters at Patreon and Glow. You are really helping to sustain this podcast. And I would just ask those who aren't yet supporters, but who love the show, are we worth a cup of coffee to you, a cocktail, or even a nice glass of wine per month? Like, if you think you can afford that, we'd be really, really grateful. You'll get the monthly bonus episode, Last Call, which is actually going to be a double header this month because we had so many questions for our guests. And you'll also get our newsletter. Go to patreon.com/femsplainers or glow.fm/femsplainers and help us support the show. And afterwards, stay with me because after Sandra, we're going to have some clean up the rest of our listener reaction, and maybe we'll have a surprise guest to answer some of your very critical emails about our show with Ann Applebaum and David Frum. We might have someone in here to address them directly. But now to today's show. Sorry about that, Meghan. Well, you and I have been friends for a very, very long time, which I'm glad to say. And we've been with each other maybe since as young women together in our early or middle 30s?
We were yummy mummies. Yeah. We were in our early 30s, I think. Early to middle 30s. We were yummy mummies.
We were yummy mummies.
That term for me today. Yes, and we are now traveling into what is this phase? The Madwoman phase, I suppose, our Roomba phase,
or the goddess phase. I think that she writes hilariously. Sandra writes hilariously about. Or it's also
our inner god.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, as Germaine Greer once famously complained, the age of invisibility. that this is where we just become invisible. I guess it's like we're no longer sex symbols. We're no longer, but we just stop being
on. I don't know about that. I just think that we become sex symbols for a different age cohort.
The 90.
As I eagerly reported to my family, including my husband, I was thrilled to have an attempted pickup not so long ago. I was down on the harbor.
What? Somebody hit on you?
Yes, a distinguished-looking older man, because that's where we are.
Man, how much? Come on, how much older? How much older?
Well, let's see. Well into the AARP years, shall we say?
Was he?
It was flat. I immediately called my husband. Guess what?
Mom still got it.
The mention invisibility, though. Can we talk about a really important thing?
Yes.
And that is whether blondes have more fun or are more noticeable. So you, as anyone can see, looking at the Zoom, are a dazzling blonde. And until
I am that middle-aged. I've got the standard issue middle-aged blonde highlights covering up for hair that I would describe natural hair that is the color of a dead mouse.
Yeah. Well, my entire life, my childhood, I was very, very blonde. So I'm a natural blonde, and my natural blonde was for decades naturally enhanced by the miracle of chemicals. And about a week ago, I decided to sort of phase out, just to see what it was like, to phase out of the blonde way of life and enter what, I don't know what we'd call this, the sort of auburn mood. Two things that are really noticeable about it. One is that every time I look in the mirror, I think I'm looking at a desperado who's about to head off cross country in a stolen vehicle. The other is that, I think it is there. I think there is something very, very, very much to the idea that blondes get noticed more. I feel as though I'm moving around incognito. It's just something about the number of heads that turn. Not that I'm particularly counting them, despite the incident on the harbor, which
there's a man who likes a brunette of a certain age.
No, that was pre-brunette. That was pre-brunette. No, It really is interesting. And I think I now really, it confirms for me the reason that I kept to blonde for so long and why I may well revert to blonde, because it's just, there is something about that, that identity that is somehow, I don't know, it's just flashier, I guess. Well,
it's as you age, remember, as you age, the blonde highlights soften the edges. I think Oscar Wilde once said of a widow, she's gone gold with grief. And I think this is now the standard thing. We all modern women go gold with age. But it is an interesting moment. I just want to say, I am never, ever hit on, except I did notice we're in this very rural area of Canada. And I was in the hardware store, and get this, Meghan, I had my mask on, so there I am in the hardware store with a mask. And I did notice a couple of those older local contractors kind of gave me the once over. So I don't know.
Yeah, like Mata Hari or whatever, the mask introduces an mystery. It's like lingerie for the face.
Lingerie for the face. Yeah, I thought, I could come home and say to David, well, David, I could leave you for a contractor. And he didn't look too worried.
That would be one way to secure reliable contracting services.
Oh, be useful, for God's sake. Yeah, well, this is one of Sandra's things. Like she in her book, she writes about, I think it was in her book, or I've also read so many of her essays, but the sort of a taxonomy of husbands. And you never get, the one who is handy is never the guy who is sensitive, who is never the guy who is a high earner. You can never get them all in one person.
That conflicts with my observations and my life.
Well, the other thing is you and I have talked a little bit over these past few weeks, and I haven't known how to bring it up on the podcast, but I think Sandra, I really want to ask her about this. She's the perfect person to ask. This whole phenomenon of Karens, and this is the the memes now of if you are a middle-aged white woman and you complain or asked to call the manager, you are deemed a Karen because you're entitled. And I keep saying to my kids, I think, do you think I'm a Karen? I mean, I just feel under siege that they keep saying, no, Mom, you don't understand the meme. And the meme is about, and it began as a kind of still cruel, like a sort of working class woman going into
with a wedge haircut.
With the wedge haircut.
With the sort of sideburns and a very tight back. And she
complaining about a Black employee at the Walmart. That's how I think it began.
Oh, I didn't know that part of it.
That's at least according to Urban Dictionary and my kids. But I just find, I think, and I want to talk to Sandra about this too, we talk about invisibility as middle-aged, but I realize that middle-aged women are at that point in their lives where we're the most useless. Where it's, to society, we're the most useless. Because think about it, we're no longer hot babes, if we ever were. Our kids are probably mostly grown up and don't need us anymore. Maybe our husbands are looking at sports cars more hungrily than they're looking at us. And yet we're not quite ready to be put on the shelf. So I think there's just this welling up suddenly against, what they're calling Karens is against, us middle-aged white women. I just know I will never, ever, ever, ever ask to see the manager ever again unless it's about telling them what an amazing service I've had.
Well, okay, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm ready to buy your diagnosis of what it is to be a middle-aged woman, because I actually don't think that we are necessarily invisible. I don't think that we're not needed, and I don't think our husbands don't desire us. I mean, really. I do think that we are at this, and this is something Sandra writes about so hilariously and beautifully in her book. We are in this really interesting pivot point, though. I mean, you're onto something, but it's that we are as in terms of, say, sexual desirability. We're definitely out of the hot babe territory, not into the geriatric facility just yet, but we're somewhere like, everyone's trying to find their way a little bit at this age, right? How high does the skirt go? How low does the hair go? How blonde should you be, really? Women of our age, which we're mid-50s, right? Sometimes, and I'll cop to this, if you stay in shape, you can have that mortifying experience of hearing like a car rumble up behind you as somebody checks you out from behind. And then they pull past, they accelerate. It's like, oh, never mind.
It's like some horror movie. The beautiful blonde turns around and she's a monster.
She's 56.
Skeleton.
But, that's what I'm talking about. There's that we're in that interesting pivot time, and and our children actually do need us, but they also need us at an age. They may feel some need for us, but they're at an age where they feel especially that they should repudiate parental guidance. And my kids range in age from 14 to 26, so there's a lot of room in there.
Yeah, we should mention you do have five kids.
I do have 5 kids, and that's the age range, and so again, both needed and unneeded, youthful and beautiful, not youthful and beautiful. Everything's kind of on on the seesaw there, and so that the Karen stuff, as far as speaking your mind to a manager. The sad thing about it is, I think for a lot of women, you have to learn to be assertive. You have to learn to manage, let's say, a family, a career, a household, whatever. So you're at the top of your capabilities. And at our age, in the mid-50s, you're not afraid of a little bit of pushback, and you also know what you're entitled to. That is to say, not as a white woman, but as a citizen, as a customer. Yeah. You've lived long enough and you've eaten enough dinners that you know that if the food comes and it's overcooked, it's actually not your problem. It's their problem, and it's reasonable in a kind of commercial transaction to return something to the kitchen if it isn't what it's supposed to be. Right?
Uh-oh, I think you're the Karen. I think you're the Karen.
No. Well, I'm sure I've had my moments, but But no, I think it's one of these cruel jokes, right, of biology, that just as you get to the point when you're really, quite capable of asserting yourself in public, let's say, the public then says, "Oh, we've heard enough from you, lady. Quiet down."
Well, that's the tragic thing. And I also worry that, like Sandra writes about these very funny, the targeted ads she's now getting. And I just worry, there's little sort of old Victorian towns around where we are, and you go in and there's some very pretty, but often very, I think what you would call, Meghan, twee shops. And I remember going in with my youngest daughter, B, and there are all these, like, they've got herbal teas and mugs and little signs hanging to put in your home, and kaftans and things like that, yoga mats. And she goes, "Mommy, why are there so many little signs about wine? Like it's always wine o'clock, or life's too short to drink bad wine." Or like really cruel ones about ex-husbands. I found one that said, "I still miss my ex-husband, but my aim is improving." And I think, I'm terrified. I'm going to start wanting to buy those signs and hang it in my house. I mean, I think there's a reason we all drink too much wine, at this age. It's a thing.
I don't know. I'm in pain from the ex-husband line. I mean, it's funny.
It's funny.
So sad.
Well, let's bring on Sandra. Maybe she can make us feel better, though I'm not sure she will. But let's bring her on. Let me actually, just before we bring her on, let me just give a quick summary of the book, that and who Sandra is. Quick femme facts. She's an American writer, actress, radio personality, and a former professor of art. She also was an early performance artist, which I kind of want to hear about. Her new book is The Madwoman and the Roomba, My Year of Domestic Mayhem. And it's a follow-up to her best-selling book about, can we say it, menopause, The Madwoman and the Volvo. And she's also a contributor to The Atlantic magazine, where she's written many, many great and often jaw-dropping essays, which we'll get to. And The Madwoman and the Volvo is described as a chronicle of the indignities, hilarities, and unexpected joys of life in the so-called golden years. Having been promised crystal clear seas and sandy beaches on the shores of retirement by glossy advertisements and in-flight magazines, best-selling author Sandra Tsing Loh finds the reality of being 55 years old looks more like a dilapidated craftsman house with a dead lawn and a mouse problem. Let's bring on Sandra. With businesses moving many of their operations off-site and having to make tough decisions about their employees, why not consider using Bambee for your HR and save money? Because when running a business, HR issues can kill you. Wrongful termination suits, minimum wage requirements, labor regulations, and HR manager salaries aren't cheap, an average of $70,000 a year. Bambee, spelled B-A-M-B-E-E, was created specifically for small business. You can get a dedicated HR manager, craft HR policy, and maintain your compliance, all for just $99 a month. With Bambee, you can change HR from your biggest liability to your biggest strength. Your dedicated HR manager is available by phone, email, or real-time chat. From onboarding to terminations, they customize your policy to fit your business and help you manage your employees day to day, all for $99 a month. Month to month, no hidden fees. You can cancel at any time. You didn't start your business because you wanted to spend time on HR compliance. Let Bambee help and get your free HR audit today. So go to Bambee.com/femme right now to schedule your free HR audit. That's Bambee.com/femme, spelled B-A-M to the BEE.com/femme. welcome to the Femsplainers.
Hello.
We're
I'm so happy to be here.
Femsplaining. You are like
here, virtually here. Yeah.
One of the greatest femsplainers. I see you are in your craftsman house in Pasadena with, as you've written about, the dead mice. It's a metaphor for...
And
yes. I think there actually is still a rat trap here. Well, I didn't say the word rat, mouse. No rats. Mice, that's what we call them.
Well, I didn't know whether to, when they say about books, that cliche, I laughed and I cried. I didn't know actually whether to laugh or cry with your book because I just so identified with it. And it made me a lot of the time just sad, even when you were being funny.
Well, it's true. I mean, it was supposed to be a year in the life. My first book was called Depth Takes a Holiday many years ago. So many, I think almost 25 years ago. And it was a collection of short, funny essays about life, about the small things of life. So to a certain extent, this book was conceived of that same way. Short, funny essays about life, except of course it's midlife. So there's a little bit more of an emotional arc journey in it, just because if there isn't, you're not really of a certain age. like not everything is laugh out loud funny, but yeah. So I think that, and there's a little moment in the middle of the book where somebody said, and then suddenly I just was starting to weep. Why? And it's about June commencement, graduation season. And that's a little bit built in. I mean, I guess our humor today as women of a certain age it's kind of like a certain kind of aromatherapy massage with just that little bit of cardamom in it or whatever that strain, turmeric in it, because that's how we get our laughs now. Just a little crying and peeing.
So Sandra, that's perfectly apropos what you just said for what I wanted to talk to you about almost most from reading the whole book. I mean, it's fantastic. I love you sort of responding to the too muchness of everything. Right. But in particular, I wanted to talk to you about and have you tell us something about the exhausting nature of self-care. You used this wonderful phrase, personal sustainability. There's some kind of, nuclear power plant and we need to be sort of monitored and, fed fuels and things all the time. You talk about that because I think in the book, it's just great that you're riffing on it.
Well, I think, so a little bit of the arc of it is it was originally going to be called something like Second World Problems, which means I define as first world guilt on a third world budget, right? Which makes you all going to the farmer's market. You don't know why, because if you don't cook your family an organically grown vegetable thing, McDonald's wins. So you go there and they only take cash and you want basil and they always say it's out of season. I'm going, it's California. I don't understand. So that you're buying, lamb's ear and sorrel and all kinds of like kohlrabi that rot in your refrigerator. And then before you just go to Church's Fried Chicken and don't tell anybody about it. Church's is really good, by the way. So I think that in these, and as I would say, in the wonky part of it, of thinking, Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique came out around 50 years ago. So Hillary Clinton's presidency was supposed to line up with all that. So that was kind of like the journey that we were all supposed to be on. So the idea was, and there's this great book I always quote, The Capitalization of Feminism, where, let's say in the 50s, men worked 40 hours a week. And now women were going to join the workplace. So women were going to humanize the workplace and the men were going to become more nurturing. What could go wrong? So instead of working 40 hours a week, the men work 50 now. The women work 60 and they spend more time with their kids than did 1950s stay-at-home moms during the week. Because, they don't ride their bikes anywhere in the neighborhood and the women don't ring the dinner bell at 7 and go, come get your meatloaf and tater tots and your Jell-O. Now it's like women are grinding so hard, working, like leaning in at their jobs, leaning backwards into their marriages with the once a week date night, with the Oprah lingerie, and then trying to, do Pilates for this part and do the farmer's market stuff. And of course, our children are all gifted and fragile, all of them, especially yours or anyone listening to that, your children are the most gifted. And then of course, my dad also in this book, he's 97. He just will not, he's become another lifer and won't die. So, but to go back to your question of that phrase, this is a chapter that is based on a real event, which Arianna Huffington's new book, The Sleep Revolution. And then she was being thrown a book party. So Arianna Huffington, amazing to us all, suddenly she discovered this amazing new thing, wait for it, called sleep. It's like,
Sandra, you're not getting enough sleep. Sandra.
The gates of horn and ivory. It's like, and I was noting this whole phenomenon because I reviewed another book from the New York Times of the super achieving type A executive female next door. That somehow Arianna Huffington, who's unlike me in every possible way, because I sleep like a champion, it's kind of like, and so does my whole family. That's all we do. Except that now she knows that you what in personal sustainability that you need to really sleep now. But unfortunately, even she screwed up sleep because now you have to sleep and then get up and write a TED Talk now that you're so sort of. And sometimes I would even say words to myself when I'm trying to sleep, of refresh, restore, recharge. But even the word recharge is it's terrifying to think of it 3 or 4 in the morning. It's like, recharge for what? What time am I getting up? Where am I flying? Am I flying to Davos? So the whole cycle of what we call the personal sustainability, it's like another thing to add to your
to-do list.
To your list.
Yeah.
Sustain. Not just to sleep or eat chocolate or whatever, or drink, but to sustain. And I had also reviewed another book where another type A woman suddenly says, you know what? I learned to drop the ball. So just, you had made out those invitations for the kid's birthday party that you're throwing on an island. So it's like let them go out 3 days late. It's like, I didn't even know that was a thing we were supposed to do. It's like such a terrifying book of kind of stop cleaning the top of your refrigerator.
Yeah.
Does anyone do that? And then I looked on the top of my refrigerator. It was hideous. I had never thought about that. So I think that's part of the women's journey. And that's a very long answer to your question of even when they invented those Biore strips and then you see the black ads. It's like capitalism, I think, is very good at inventing ever new ways for women to worry.
Well, I like when you said this, I really identify with this. When are we allowed to let ourselves go? That as you say, back in the day, we would have been in our 50s and we would just not be expected to go to all these fitness classes, keep up a nice appearance, of course. But this, what I loved about I want to also talk to you about your views of marriage, which not high on, but this idea that you once wrote that you got a divorce because you didn't want to go through the task of learning to fall in love with him again, because that was also something more that you had to do. So when does it stop, Sandra? When does this stop? When can we just let it go?
So I believe the answer is at age 80, because I think there's been scientific studies shown that after the age of 80, you shouldn't lose weight because that's called wasting. If you can gain weight, go for it. Also, so just don't waste. Also, if your blood pressure goes up, that's better for your mental acuity. So I believe at age 80, things can really, then you can really, maybe then we can go to the muumuus that we're not allowed to wear now, as I say, and that people will go, Sandra, don't wear those floppy, I call them the goddess pants, which are basically like the goddess pants I have here, where it's kind of an elastic waistline, one size fits all, sort of a Pima Bollywood harem dance pant. And so I was so excited about these things, around my birth, where I'm going, I'm turning 56. What age is that? I don't know. Just like a cheese and chocolate thing. And then my friends would say, what are those pants? And my partner said, did a clown die? Or my 19-year-old said, the 80s cold, they want their pants back. So nobody would let me wear these pants. So they go, these are not the Eileen Fisher years. I go, they're all the Eileen Fisher years. It's kind of, why are we doing this? And again, it may still be driven by, I don't know, social media or capitalism or something that we're just kind of not allowed to go there.
Well, before, Sandra, before you came on, Danielle and I were talking about this. The question really, do you, when you hit your mid-50s, do you actually become invisible? And Danielle was slightly leaning toward that side. Yes, so you become less visible in the world. But I'm inclined to the opposite view. And I think you proved my point with your story about those horrific pants. And that is you're almost too visible. Everybody sees you. Your partner sees you or your husband. Your children are watching you. People on the street see you, whatever, and everyone's got something to say. You're not allowed to. You cannot go into that good Eileen Fisher night. They won't let you. You've got to keep it together for them. And by the way, can I just say I have a searing and personal anecdote about not goddess pants, but I had this idea once in a vintage store. I was in my late 40s. And I saw a caftan, and it was a vintage caftan that had it had paisley on it. There were elements of pink and green and other kind of mystical colors. And I saw this thing, and I was thrilled. You know how vintage clothing is often very well made, right? So I thought, this is a beautiful piece of old 1960s attire, and I pictured myself wearing that, floating around, serving like clinking glasses of whiskey to my guests. And I bought it, and I put it on at home and showed my family. And one of my daughters literally physically threw herself in front of the door of my the room where I changed it. And she said, "You can't go out in that. There's just no way you could do it." And it was just such a painful illustration of this. The inner me was this, glamorous figure sweeping about. And from the outside, I looked like a clown had died and I had put on his clothes.
Well, I think that's interesting. And that may well be so, both the invisibility and the visibility. And I've certainly, there's a much longer anecdote that would take 4 hours to tell and would require 10 bottles of wine. But the short version, a bifold answer to the first and then to the second. I think yes. And our children are always looking at us. It's kind of like, and saying, did you use the right pronoun? Are you using paper towels, Mom? Oh my God, is that a plastic straw? Jesus. So you're doing, to be this kind of mid-50s age is to be about that, because it's kind of like a young baby boomer, late Gen Xer to be in that generation. So you're being tested constantly. And I think, and I have a friend who is approaching 80, really full-on boomer, and we have these conversations where she is not of the age where she gets tested by the young gender, like the age that we're at, of like, are you using the pronouns or whatever? And so she considers herself extremely liberated in sort of a Berkeley hippies protesting the Vietnam War way, but cannot ever even get a they pronoun. Like I've told her so many times, like, that person is a they, my kid's a they. And then she just can't get it, but doesn't even know that she's not getting it, because she doesn't have these young people and like constantly looking at what and giving you on a graded scale of what you're doing. I think also though, because we're kind of in the role of mothers, there's a kind of funny visibility of mothers. And so the longer anecdote that I won't tell all of was that last summer I was in a theater development, kind of a summer camp, you know what I mean? One of those arts things over the summer. And I was actually sort of cast as sort of the wise elder with a bunch of younger playwrights. And it was interesting.
Oh, isn't that like
see
the Hollywood role? You get the mother, you start getting the mother parts and like.
And what I noticed in this, like, it's a much longer like thing, but it's kind of like, so at the mealtime and we're being served by interns, I'm noticing I'm always the one that says, "Hi, are you okay?" That I'm making a lot of eye contact and doing the pleasing thing. And so what happened was when our critiques came up, it's kind of like everybody got love, 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 love. Oh, I just like, and then mine was it's where they stoned Mom. You're not hip enough. You're not, he's kind of like, you're racist. I go, well, I'm a person of color. You're a transphobe. It's like, I have. So it was interesting when women get a certain age, even the mother thing, I just know, and maybe I may but I definitely saw like a mother thing. It was like, and then I started apologizing to people for, I guess, how bad my play. I mean, and I just kind of noticed that behavior within myself, that may be being both invisible and visible. What I find does work at this particular time of life is if you're driving across town and you have to go to the bathroom and you just have to pee. And like, so if you go to a convenience store or something and they go, we don't have the key, I call it my menopause face of the like, I am there. And then they like move things very quickly because the scary menopausal lady, pair that with a thrift store outfit and people will clear as quickly as possible.
Well, this is where we were talking about this before you came on. I feel this sort of cultural hatred right now towards what we're calling the Karens. And it as we said before, my kids were saying, you're not but that meme, Mom. But we are kind of all that meme
I think it's a really hurtful and dismissive meme that's not called out by anyone of the people who kind of look at their neighborhoods. They say pick up your trash or it's like it's really I think it's a really harmful, it's a really hateful meme.
Well, but it's also, I guess it's this middle-aged demographic because, as you were just saying, maybe it's better to be just written off as too old to change, because that seems to be the next phase. It's like they're not going to criticize us anymore because, oh, that's grandma. Oh my God, give her a martini. She's just an old racist. She doesn't get it,
but she means well. She's
okay.
And you're waiting for the money from the grandparents to come. And some conveniently are across the country. They send tuition money for the kids to go to their liberal arts colleges, etc. But they know that that's just where the money comes from.
Right.
Maybe.
Can you talk about some of my favorite parts of your book were your wine sessions, WINE, but I guess WHINE, sessions with your best friends. And there were revelations there for me about middle-aged men that first this was a total revelation to me that many middle-aged women complain of not getting sex anymore. And I always thought like the meme or the cliche is that, the women have given up, but there are just marriages where there is nothing. And that was a surprise to me. And then you also talked about these husbands, this sort of phenomenon of the house husband who is always in there cooking. And as you notice, he's an excellent house husband, but a lousy housewife. And it's in this dynamic where the woman is really working harder, the 60 hours, earning more money, and she's coming home and he's got garlic simmering on the stove for some bespoke sauce, but he hasn't changed light bulbs. So talk about this little sort of middle-aged, I mean, you live with someone, right? You have for a long time. So maybe from what you observe in these middle-aged marriages, and then maybe why you've decided not to jump back in that bubbling pot.
Boy, that's a great question. It's so multifaceted. So I guess I'll do a little intro and then go to this section. So my earlier book, The Madwoman and the Volvo, My Year of Raging Hormones, was basically, I was, and as described in, I guess, the marriage piece that you're quoting in The Atlantic. So I was 46. So I was kind of a late mother, gave birth 38 and 40, like National Geographic turtle washing up on the beach with their last leathery eggs, as I like to say. So I then, in the early 40s, it was big revolution, and we're going to change our schools, and I'm baking pies, and I got the sudden hormone uplift of having the young children. And then by 46, and I had actually staged a political protest about government funding in front of the Sacramento Capitol, to which we rented RVs. I mean, it was this explosion of hormonal energy. Then I go, now I can drive an RV. Let's go to Burning Man to see the art for my sister's 50th. And then, of course, once we were at Burning Man, we brought my platonic friend, who's my theater producer partner of 10 years, to help us build a camp shower and drive, which he really did. And then one of my girlfriends goes mad as we walk around the planet. It's the big thing of sand. It's the truth serum, where she goes, great news. Recently, I found my G-spot. And I go, fantastic. And she goes, but not with the husband. Like, oh no. So we were all the PTA moms that had brunches together and our kids swam in the same pools and et cetera, et cetera. And then it was kind of like the first little dot of black ink in the pond of, you are actually having an affair, what? And she said, yeah, and I'm really horny. And you know what, tonight I'm going to have sex with like my partner who's upstairs. And I started thinking, wow, that's really bold. What a great idea that would be. I didn't know that he was available for, if I knew the door of the sex pantry was slightly ajar, I could kind of steal a little kind of jar of pickles. Like, it's kind of like, we're at Burning Man. It's kind of like, maybe just a camp snuggle before I go home, you know. So that opened at that particular time. And that was kind of a midlife crisis. They call it like a female midlife crisis. It used to be just the men would turn 40 or 45, get the red Ferrari and the hairpiece and the secretary girlfriend named Jennifer.
Vanessa.
Typically Vanessa. And now the women were able to do it because they were more financially independent. So that everybody can go through a midlife moment where they go, and I was so deeply in love, madly in love at 46, if you could, that crazy teen, like, yeah. And he also felt that back. It was, it was mutual. So you go, if at 46, I can find this kind of love, I should go for it because I'm going to live to 90, and that marriages now last so many more years. I mean, I think the life expectancy in 1900 was about 49. So most menopausal women were, of course, dead. So I think if you can go for it then, but what happens in other marriages, I talk to other people, many more than you would think, who from the outside, their marriages look really good. The children are gifted and they're into sports and they have a routine and their home is beautiful and they're for all the right causes, et cetera, et cetera. But that inside, somebody's thinking of having an affair. Someone is having one. At night, the twin laptops go up in the eerie glow. They don't talk at night. But often it's just too much to uproot the children's schedules and the home. And we've been talking before we started about debt, kind of like how much debt, how would we even break up that debt? So there is a lot of that. And what happens is sometimes the women get more energized as they go on, and then the men become like more into their World War II, documentaries and their collecting of their strange wooden boats, et cetera, et cetera. But then because your question was long and my answer is even longer, so I'll stop. But the thing about men cooking fills me with such insane rage that we have Michael Pollan and I was too angry to really actually read any of the Loh's books, but my sense is kind of like, well, slow food, if you don't have time to slow down and make that simmer sauce, it's because you don't care. And so the men have taken on this artisanal simmer sauce making with the sink fills with a mandolin and the special tongs and the gear and all that kind of stuff. Yes, the light bulbs will be changed, et cetera, et cetera. And it's kind of like, and as we said in that section of the book, it's kind of like, well, I do so much driving. The day that they invent a car where there's a crock pot in the dashboard is when I'll start slow cooking. Because it's like, I spend so much time in the car driving people around. I'm sorry about the planet, but I live in Los Angeles and this is the way our things are set up. And also when you see someone like Alton Brown, and this will be at the end because I know this has been a bit of a tirade, but when you see someone like Alton Brown on his show, it's always the stainless steel. The kitchens are as clean as a surgery station. And he never has to run back to the store for the one thing. There's never a dog that runs through or a wet child screaming. He's always in this kind of mystical biodome of checking the temperature of the salmon in the middle. And then magically the dishes are washed and disappear. Whereas women for decades and centuries, and I know my mom had kind of the moms get the bad reputation. So like, oh, my mom was a bad cook. My mom hated to cook. She made mac and cheese out of a whatever. And you know what other things she was doing a ton of? She was also doing the laundry at the same time. So why don't they have a thing where the men put the pasta on to boil and then they kind of sort socks in the laundry while waiting for
because they're chefs, Sandra. They're not just cooking, they're chefs.
Right.
So I just want to be very clear about something. Are you saying, Sandra, because it sounds like you are, that that sex goes out of a marriage when a husband does too much cooking?
That's really hilarious. I mean, there actually has been.
There's something sort of maybe a little too feminine, a little too relaxed, a little too domestic about these dudes, and they're worried about their basil, and maybe they would know what to do with the kohlrabi. Right, but there's what's in it for the wife then? You know, like, I don't know. Make the connection here for me.
Well, okay, there has been one study that the more, you know, and then for a while, like on the Oprah show, there was an Oprah thing of like, the best foreplay is for him to empty the dishwasher, like, and then I'll have sex with him. They've done studies, and it turns out that is not true.
It would not, I think, work.
It seems statistically that women get turned on by men not emptying the dishwasher or not putting the girly apron on and doing the simmer sauce, but seeing him mow the lawn or
shirtless.
And I always have this thing, and it's in like refinishing the wooden floors. It's like the wooden floors need refinishing. How about you and a bunch of guy friends, like do it on a weekend? None of them will do that anymore because, the back. You just can't. And then there's a struggle even to get them to get their shit off the floor, and you can edit that or what. Or they're unread New Yorkers off the floor so that you can get a pile of people to refinish the floors that you researched yourself. So I think it may be something that changes. Not that men cooking, but they do get into it in a really weird, like Talmudic study way that's very and they went, and I know that my partner was reading a James Beard recipe where to make the perfect scrambled eggs takes 2 hours. It's a very low heat.
Yeah, and you have to constantly stir it, and it's
constant
delicious.
stirring.
Well, it's monastic. It's as if men are invading. It's like life mansplaining. Like they're coming into our spaces and they're showing us how we should be doing it better. And I just, as an aside, we have a longtime bachelor friend, very, very successful, keeps it going by having a series of very attractive and talented women in his life. But he's found someone he seems a little more serious about, and we're talking, and he said, he sort of nodded, he goes, she just makes things so nice. I mean, it's almost homey. And I was like, that's our brand, like that's what we do. Don't be surprised. Yeah, we bring candles in, we do that kind of thing. But what we're at really is a reckoning at this age. And we're sort of on the top of some sort of mound or mountain looking back and forth. And one of the sort of compelling themes of your book is this sense that, we're not the people in the Crystal Cruise flyers that come in, catalogs that come in the house. Those slay me, although I guess there won't be Crystal Cruises for a while. But that silvery couple, I think you had the pale linens, and they've got their glass of wine, and they're and they're going into Athens and things, or ruins, and you think that's not me, and my kids aren't those other kids in some other catalogs. That one of the most searing chapters or essays you were talking about taking your kids to lunch with a couple that sounds like they could have been in the Crystal Cruise catalog, and just feeling, oh my God, we're also inadequate. My children are inadequate. They're not, it's, why aren't they trying to choose between Stanford and Yale? I mean, I'll be lucky if my kids even get to college. Talk about a little bit of the disappointment.
Well, I mean, one way to interpret a little bit of that is, so this is also partly a book about Asianness, and it's in a very low-key way, but I think that's part of, so my father is fully Asian from Shanghai, immigrant, science. I'm half Asian, so a little watered down, And as I like to say, I went into the liberal arts, which to a Chinese father is like pole dancing. That's a joke on that. My kids are 1/4 Asian. So that means like my older daughter is blonde, but there's something with the eyes where you go, that reminds me, are those almond eyes? So they're interested in art and psychology and cartooning and memorizing lines from sitcoms that would not be shown today because now they would be so politically incorrect, and annoying voices, and they just kind of like, they were, woo. So this particular couple you're talking about is somebody who did, and the theme of education is one that goes through this also. And certainly the idea that, my kids, they will never go to Yale. There's no way, because, not because they're not intelligent, but like, we have not played the right sports. They don't play any sports. So to start there, you were not on crew or lacrosse or anything. We start learning in slow motion of kind of like, you should have started back in 6th grade, like doing the PSAT, because you have not volunteered in the important places. You have not gone to Cambodia to like, oh my God, it's kind of like to learn suddenly be shown that we were of a different class, which was in this particular lunch or meal that you're describing. And that we're becoming the wrong kind of Asian, which is also back to back with this funeral thing where my granduncle, who is a great Chinese painter, died. And of course, my immigrant family goes to Forest Lawn in not a fancy part of LA, where you go to the open gravesite, people in coveralls explain the plot number, and then the truck backs up to tamp down the grave with a big tamping tool that goes ding, ding, ding. It's like, and then we go to lunch at a restaurant with the smeary pig snouts and the plastic. As like, we are not the right kind of Asian to be aware that we're downwardly mobile Asians, which is also true of my partner, who's a WASP, downwardly mobile WASP. So I think this moment, and a little bit of that is class, maybe. I mean, I really not thought about the question the way you've put it. But with those the crystal cruises and the dry cleaning linen, white linen and a red glass of wine, I go, and you're on a boat. I don't even know. And so part of that may have been, I call the late boomers, or I used to call the downwardly mobile professionals, or the dumpies back when I was in my 20s. We had just missed the real estate boom, the BMWs, the Rolexes, et cetera, and now it was like a Hyundai Scoop, and IKEA furniture was the big revelation of my generation. I wrote a piece in Buzz magazine called
The Billy Bookcase. The Billy Bookcase. We all had the Billy Bookcase. Yeah,
exactly.
I got them twice.
Yeah, well, you have to, because they're not water resistant, even though they go like, oh my God, and they collapse. They kind of like start melting, like, even though you have a house to furnish, they're made.
The center is
like cardboard, sort of melting. So I think that's kind of the thing of being in an in-between place. And also here you can see we're aging bohemians. So we still think of ourselves of, the cat peed on the thing, throw a pashmina shawl all over. And you can actually see, looking at my living, and there's the massage chair right there. It's still kind of a like you say that's our brand.
Yeah, you're pointing to those. To those listening, some of this will be on YouTube as well. But yes, you've got this sort of craftsman background, and you're blocking.
But it's sort of messy, and they're
that elder chair in the back that you get that Barca lounger that's going to get the
it's a massage chair. It's the Costco massage chair where I go, I didn't give a flying whatever, I'm going to buy it, and it's in my living room, and people sit in it all the time. So maybe part of let's say the joy of this time of feeling I have an 85-year-old's body with the bank account of a 25-year-old. Or I like to say, my banker called and he said, I have the IRA of a 25-year-old. That's not a good thing. But the in-between spaces, maybe where you stop caring about you can't care anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's all out the gate anyway. And to a certain extent, I think even culturally, and I think a lot of that Paul Fussell's book Class many years ago, and to a certain extent, I would love to write an update of that, which Times reporter suggested to me, because all the stuff we used to care about, it's kind of like what is culture now anyway? What does going to the right school really get you now in a time where I know Harvard graduates are, sitting out in summer in quarantine going, what do I do? It's all up for grabs now, it sort of seems.
Sandra, when I was reading your book, as I read through, January and February, and I came to March, and I actually felt a little clutching in my throat. I thought, oh, she doesn't know it, but she's going to go into quarantine. And of course, the book is not about this year. But, there is something about the way the calendar has, everybody's life came to a stop on or about March 13th, right?
Yeah.
13th, 14th, that was the weekend when suddenly it kind of gripped us all by the throat. I would love to know, how are you holding up yourself? I expect you've been taking copious notes.
Well, horribly, I would say. No, I would go, yes, I've been very productive. I've been writing a new book, and I've built an entire herb garden in back, and I've like some people have done that. Some of my friends, they remodeled a bathroom, and they're just loving being at home, and it's like they're reading sort of to each other at night, and so I think for me, I just realized I started becoming, when I saw the layers of myself peel away as layers of an onion week after week, that I think like many people, I took for granted how I sort of call it, and this would sound politically incorrect again, but the ADHD kind of nature of life as we knew it. And one of the big things for me turned out to be going to the gym, because even though I'm not buff at all, as a writer who's pretty sedentary, it's like even 2 days a week of spinning class of kind of like, I'm going to try to get the better parking place because I have an electric car now. So that was like a game. And then getting the good parking stamp, and then getting the bike that you have to sign up for, and all the anxious middle-aged people and their kind of weird tattoos and their titanium water bottles and their lycra pants. And we would go, her name is Rio and she dances on the sand, like kind of to the boomer music, and then steam, pretend to stretch, and then steam, and then pump the Kiehl's products, which is kind of like cardio. It was kind of like, and then when that was gone, then life became really flat, where I couldn't even go to the park. It's kind of like, let's go to the park. I don't even like going to the park and do calisthenics or go to a trail or whatever. So stuff started really slowing down a lot, to a point where one day went into the next. And it's hard, again, if you're a writer already, you're sedentary, to mark these things. And I think also what I've noticed, and many of us have recently started talking about this, although this is the first Zoom of the day, of like the weird Zoom exhaustion, because now all these meetings are back to back. We're in each other's faces, literally. And we used to complain about traffic in Los Angeles. Now we realize sitting in the car, going from one place to the next, was a kind of respite. When you're in your car, listening to whatever you want, and you get breaks, and now we don't. I'm longing to write the Madwoman and the Pandemic, which was totally be kind of, I've been taking like notes on, and gaining the quarantine 20 and the grief weight and all of that, which has also been part of it.
I just like to call it the COVID-19.
And 19, that's pretty good. That's really not bad. It's like, oh my God.
Well, you took up corny yoga, right? Like because you wrote an essay. You've been hit. I mean, we've all been hit in different ways, but you've been hit. You've been quite depressed, and you followed this yoga guru. And the best thing about her, you noted that she's not at all challenging. It's not scary. It's not like those spin classes with the savage women on the other bikes, like biker
That's
chicks.
True.
But it's But you just like hug yourself or work yourself into child's pose or something, and you seem to you like that.
Yeah, doing that a lot. And I think the sense of purposelessness, especially at the beginning, where you go, what can I do? Can I make masks for emergency workers? No, because I have poor motor skills and I don't know how to make them. And I'll just, with my sweaty, infected hands, send people shit that doesn't work. And so it was slowly, and so the news kept saying, there's a California surge, don't even go to the grocery store this week. Mm-hmm. We go, well, are there sick people at the grocery store? And then we're going, no, it's probably because with your mask and your gloves, if you stub your toe against your cart, then you have to go to the emergency room. And so it's like the best thing you could do is just lie in bed like a blob and hug your pillow, and you can drink rosé all day and watch Game of Thrones, or what the zombie one, The Walking Dead, but then don't slip when you go to the bathroom and stub your toe. So it was kind of like this just don't go anywhere, don't do anything. And so people start just getting on social media and getting really kind of it looped in their own head. So I thought this yoga with Adrian thing, it was just really
yoga with Adrian.
Yes. And so a friend of mine got me on it, and it's like day one,
gentle.
We're just going to breathe 3 times. And you go, namaste. And you go, that's it? I can do that.
I can do that.
So, yeah. And day 8 of gratitude is just hugging yourself and a pillow, which I do now in the Shavasana. So that's happened. But now because I don't have to please anyone anymore, I did get a Peloton. I joined the evil nation of Peloton, the yuppie, crazy, whatever. I ordered it in April, and they said, well, it's going to come in June. And back then I don't want it, because if we're still in quarantine, no, we're going to be going back to the gym. No. And then it finally came. So now I'm the oldest and fattest person on a Peloton bike. And and it is just really, and here's the thing. If
You've got that glass of wine and a cigarette,
Granny and the martini, and I can't remember anybody's names or anyone's pronouns. But it is kind of, if you're not on it, and I don't want to make a sales pitch, but it's kind of like, I never feel like exercising in the morning. You get on the bike, and it's like you put your quarter in, and the steel thing lifts. there's a very attractive, cute young person, male or female, going, hello, let's do a Dolly Parton ride, or let's do disco for 20 minutes, and come on, Bill. And so they're all very young and attractive. Well, most of them are, they're all young and attractive. And so they kind of yoo-hoo you on. So that's part of I think that's also sort of emotionally disturbing when I think about it.
So Sandra, from the wisdom that you have acquired in the heights of your goddess-like middle age, give us advice, will you? What advice would you give to us? What advice would you give to your own daughters, or to our daughters, even better, about how to live a life of serenity, purpose, meaning, etc., as interpreted through the Madwoman and the Roomba?
Wow, that's a terrifying question. Even though it was like an Amazon on life management is
the category
that it's in. So, wow. All right. I would, and this just the week that I've had already, I would say, okay, and this will be, I do think it's true, I've worn nothing but goddess pants through the entire pandemic, because anything with a button.
We're all in goddess pants. We're all in goddess pants now, even men.
But that has been sort of freeing. So that's been the weird thing, even though on Zoom you're only seeing this far up, that's been actually kind of freeing not to think about that stuff for a while. Even though, yes, as I'm like uploading CNN, I can notice kind of like, why is my belly hitting my legs, like my boobs? They're used to what? It's like a new friend, the COVID-19. So I think if there's a way, if there's a way to lower expectations as a group and agree on how mad the world is, as was already true in the Madwoman and the Roomba, of just the madness of trying to do the Pilates and the kohlrabi and the this and that, to just, I one time was asked, how do you do it all? And I go, you work and you write and you have these kids. And I go, okay, well, you should look at the inside of my car. It is like an insane, crazy person lives there, because there's stuff all over. That's where it all goes away, like coffee cups and empty water bottles. I mean, it really looks like a scavenger, or somebody who's, maybe, yeah, but yeah. So to let some of that stuff go, you want to say something?
Yeah, I do. I think that was a terrible question, and I don't blame you for. Danielle, can we have a redo on that question?
No, I was enjoying it. I was loving her. I was loving your answer. I think you're right. It's about letting it go, and not in that Arianna Huffington, we go to sleep, then we do the TED Talk. That was so brilliant. Like, I can't do this.
Okay, and just one more thing that I would say to that, and then you can see if you want to read or whatever, because I think that just the bar is super low right now. Yes. And maybe accepting that the bar is there aren't good days and bad days. There's bad days and miserable. They're all kind of gray, even though there are moments of some cool things that have happened in this time, like spending more time with our children that wouldn't have happened before. But I think for me, because I had like thinking about it a lot, because the quarantine seemed like I had gone through the 5 Kubler-Ross stages of grief, loss, and denial, and now it seems there are going to be 24 Kubler-Ross stages, and it may go on for so many things are being lost. So I think just it can be helpful to just accept that many of us are depressed, and it's not really. And so how do you do that? It's kind of like the belly breathing, hugging the pillow, and staying in bed as long as you can in goddess pants.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think it has slowed down a maniacal world. I mean, we've all had to accept our roots now are going to show. And you know, I think our mutual friend Caitlin Flanagan said it's all Dorian Gray now in Los Angeles, with all these women having their actual faces back and not being able to put fillers and Botox and things. So I think there is a kind of philosophical thing, but as you said at the beginning of the pandemic, where you're thinking, well, what can I do for my country? You could stay home and watch Netflix. You go, okay, that's easy, but what can I really, and it's been very difficult that way. It has been hard to feel that you can wear a mask, you know, and don't be a jerk about it. It's been hard to figure out anything to do that feels meaningful. So being easier on yourself is good.
I think it's good. But also as women, there is a thing of having gone through, again, these 50 years, you know, where I would say I went to college in 79 to 83. So female liberation meant that instead of the guy asking you out on a date and paying for dinner and picking you up and giving you flowers, who wants those? You had to go Dutch at the local macrobiotic restaurant. You had to have sex on the first date because otherwise you were frigid. An independent woman carried her own contraceptives, which was the horrible diaphragm with the corn powder or whatever it was. And then you had to, in the morning, you'd probably give him $20 because he was trying to find his way through poetry or drumming. So it's kind of like, that was liberation? What? Like, that was another set of chores. And now, as you said, apologizing to our kids for not having the right pronoun, et cetera, et cetera. So there has been a thing of going through this journey as women while holding all these different things together. And of course, my book dropped on June 2nd, which was Blackout Tuesday. And so, of course, we moved everything of kind of canceled and postponed stuff for this moment that is, you know, obviously a huge, important national conversation, but it is a little bit of just trying to stay out of the way or stay quiet, you know, and so I think that's a little bit of a journey now too of feeling like what can one do? I know certainly I'm frustrated by schools going back, and certainly that's a you know, people of color important thing. Our public schools in LA are, you know, 70% or less than 10% white. So it's kind of like, that's something that really haunts me, but I also don't quite know what to do with that except for volunteer remotely. So it is a hard time to, as opposed to that pussy hat moment where it's like, we're knitting hats and marching. Yay!
Right. It's hard to feel purposeful.
Now it is, exactly.
Yeah. All right, Sandra. Well, this has just been such a pleasure. So great to even virtually meet you. Huge fans, long time of your writing. I mean, I went and reread that essay on divorce, but it's still seared in my brain that you wrote in the Atlantic, I think in 2009. But thank you. Such, and the book is wonderful reading, and it's a wonderful distraction right now, which we also
like a delicious, refreshing reminder of what the world used to be, like all those crazy problems that were kind of fun now in retrospect.
That's right.
Except for the Roomba, which still circles in my, that was the one choice I made. That was a good one for now, the Roomba.
All right, Sandra, well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was a lot of fun. Oh my God. All right. Well, Meghan, thanks for joining us. Listeners, stay with me if you want to while I'll go through the last of your listener reaction before we go on break. And as I said, I may bring someone on to talk about some of your critical letters about the show. And then Meghan will look forward to seeing you and others in the fall. I'm so thrilled and excited not to be sitting in this room. Our poor listeners have had to put up with so much of me since Christina left. We're all getting COVID sick of Danielle, so I'm going to be thrilled to have co-splainers back, even if on Zoom.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, I'll see you later. I'm not sure 100% I'll be as auburn haired next time.
Might be rethinking that.
My new invisibility cloak.
All right. Yeah, you can join. You can come back and join the frosted blonde. All right. Take care, and I'll be back in a sec. Bye. So for those deciding to stay with me while we go through the listener reaction, pour yourself another cocktail, top off your wine, get another cup of coffee. We have a whole mixed mailbag here from our summer author series. And plus we have an update on the young man, Blair, who wrote to us asking us to help find him a girlfriend. Some of you were upset that our show with David Frum and Ann Applebaum was unusually politically partisan. And as our listeners know, we really try avoid that. We really try stay out of politics in general, except obviously the cultural ones. But we certainly don't want to, as we come into this election season, we're trying to serve as something as a respite from what is surely going to be a mad election season. And so, but anyway, some of you were offended and that David and Ann were so anti-Trump and some of the other views they expressed. And a typical one came from Anne Marie, who said, "Listen, I've loved the femsplainers for a long time, and I still do. I always felt that Christina tried to be open-minded and tried not to denigrate people who disagreed with her politically. But I'm quite disappointed that the femsplainers are no longer at least attempting to be somewhat bipartisan as they have in the past." So, fair. And then I got this letter. Actually, it's pretty funny. It's pretty harsh. It's really harsh on David. So I think before I read it, I'm just going to go just wander down the hall and pull David in for this. I don't think he fully realizes he's going to be my surprise guest, just to answer this directly, which I think you'll find amusing. Stand by. Okay, so I've pulled David into the studio, second bedroom, and he doesn't know what I'm going to read him. One of the things we put out on Twitter after David, you and Ann had your show was, what worries you more, to our listeners? What worries you more, the cultural left or the cultural right? And there became actually some great discussions on Twitter, but a woman named Elizabeth wrote this to us via email. She said, "I have listened to your podcast off and on for the last year. Most of the time I enjoy it, or at least learn something I didn't know. The recent podcast with David Frum was an exception. I may never listen again. For him to say, quote, 'I find it absurd that they,' his conservative friends, 'think 100 art majors in Portland are a menace, and receive only token pushback was surprising and appalling. Quote, oh, let's don't talk about that. People have died, and that was it. To describe 55 days of violence, looting, physical attacks on police, blocking exit doors of a police station and then setting it on fire, and destruction of businesses and homes as a protest by 100 art students goes beyond being an in-crowd, cocktail party attending, a feat, whatever he calls himself these days. That is the type of remark made by condescending, supercilious, fatuous twits. Rest assured, I will not be providing the support you requested for your production. Well, David, all I can say is at least we didn't lose a supporter, but so how do you respond to your critics, David?
Well, there's a specific point and a general point. So the specific point is one about what happened in Portland, Oregon, and the general point is about the thing you raised at the beginning about right versus left. So let's talk about Portland. I never have any truck of any kind with any form of illegal protest, any form of obstruction. Protest must be orderly. Protest must be peaceful, of course. It's also important at the same time as you condemn lawless and violent protests and the use of laser pointers and the things that the Portland protesters were doing, not to be a victim of people who are fabricating false TV images in order to put ideas in people's minds. Do you remember the Gilets jaunes, the yellow jackets?
Oh, yeah, Paris.
Okay. So there's a famous photograph that was circulated during the uprising of the Gilets jaunes, which showed...
Can you just explain, were they like, they were comparable to the Portland protesters?
No, the Gilets jaunes, so it started off that the French had raised gasoline taxes.
Yeah.
And the gilet jaune, the yellow jacket, the yellow vest is a garment that every French car must carry in the trunk according to law, so that if you pull over to the side of the road and you have to fix a tire, the driver is visible. So every driver has one of these.
I had no idea that was, in fact, the origin of the vest. Yeah.
And so drivers would put on their vest to protest the gasoline taxes in the grand tradition of French protest. But the movement became progressively more and more extreme and more radical, and took on alt-right forms and took on anti-Semitism. And there was an attempt by sympathizers in the United States to create an impression that this Gilets jaunes movement was sweeping France. And there's a famous image that showed the Arc de Triomphe apparently engulfed in flames.
I remember that, yeah.
And somebody who was present took a wide-angle shot to show what had happened, which was some protesters had created a fire that was about 2 or 3 feet high at a distance of some hundreds of meters from the Arc de Triomphe. But if you crouched down at the ground and shot the Arc de Triomphe through this little bonfire, it looked like the end of Paris. Okay, so that's what's going on in Portland, that Americans are sick and dying. The economy's in collapse. President Trump and his supporters want to create a complete fantasy that the United States is in the grips of some kind of anarchist insurrection. So night after night, in a 2-block area of Portland, maybe 3 blocks, around around the Mark Hatfield Federal Courthouse, disorderly people have congregated. Their peaceful protests during the day, and then their disorderly protests at night, and some window smashing and some vandalism, which we of course condemn. But first, the police, the federal these Trump Basachi, these unmarked federal police that Trump has been deploying, create just greater disturbance than the protesters would ever have created on their own. And then TV cameras for Fox and other right-wing voices create closely cropped images to create a sense that the United States is on fire, not because of the virus that is going untended, but because of these 100 art students. And it's just an illusion. And I don't think you should be fooled by it, because it's like everything you see. One of my rules of life is, remember, everything you see on YouTube was put there by somebody for a reason. They started filming for a reason, and they stopped filming for a reason, and they cut it for a reason, and their frame of the photo is there for a reason, and you need to understand what those reasons are. The camera always lies, and what you think you're seeing needs to be checked against the reporting from people on the spot, and you need to ask if this.
It didn't lie about the George Floyd images with, a policeman with his foot on the man's throat.
Because that was checked, there actually was a man dead. You could check the image against the reality of a dead man. And you could check the image against the man's own story. You could check the image against the policeman story, and you could put it into some larger context. If you do that same thing, the camera doesn't lie when it shows in Portland, when it shows tumult. I mean, there's obviously a tumult going on, but it doesn't show context, and the context is what you need to see. How is it that when the Trump police withdrew and allowed local law enforcement to do the job the way local law enforcement wanted to do, how is it the situation became suddenly much less disorderly than it had before? And this goes to the point about left-wing versus right-wing cultural threat. I think one of the things we all need to grasp is I'm not sure that those words mean what they used to mean. Is anti-masking, is anti-vaxxing, is that left-wing or right-wing? Is anti-Semitism that we see online, is it left-wing or anti-right-wing? Or is it right-wing? I mean, we are moving through, I think, a real era of and this is the theme of Anne's book, of cultural and intellectual change, or categories we inherited from the 1960s and 70s are not describing the world as we know it. And that I think through these recent years, not just Trump, but everything in Europe and in Great Britain, and this is the theme that Anne is telling us, those people who think we've inherited basically fair and just societies, where there's more to preserve than to overthrow, that we want to keep the rule of law and free markets and a social insurance network, and that we both understand that there are reforms that need to be done, but much that needs to be cherished. Well, that whatever our biographies were, that we all are discovering we have a lot more in common with each other than we have with radicals. And the radicals are discovering in turn that they all have a lot in common with each other, and that the radicals were there because they may, I think, have a lot more in common with these open carry guys in Texas show up to protest whatever they're protesting with weapons displayed, that all the violent people are on the same side fundamentally, and all the people believe
now
law.
you have Black Lives Matter armed protesters, right?
Yeah, well,
and versus why? I mean, these independent little armies coming out to fight each other.
There were images from Portland, and again, being aware of the deceptiveness of the camera, that showed some of the anarchist protesters blocking traffic, and then a heavy pickup truck tried to drive into the anarchist protesters, and then all sides drew guns on the other side. And I look at that and think, all these people should be in jail. and I think what Anne and you and I were talking about was, I'm sorry, I just refuse to be stampeded by lawlessness into Portland, into making some excuses for the vast project of left-right illiberalism that threatens from, some of the intersectional extremists who want to shut down the free traditions of our societies, but at the moment, the people who have the political power are the Trumpy right.
Okay, well, I just for the record, you were not cocktail sipping in the other room when I just brutally pulled you in to call you names. You were having a perfectly nice coffee. You were sitting at your computer, and I just haul you in to call, to have this.
Well, the cocktail party thing, I think actually is an example of just how the president how we've got these images that are left over from 1965 or 1970 of, that cocktail parties. Really? Now?
Well, also, I just want to say we will always be pro-cocktail party here in the Femsplainers, and we will not back down from that. So you can pull your support, but we are pro-cocktails here at the Femsplainers. All right, David. Well, thank you. Thank you for putting up with that. And I mean, the name calling. You gave a very thoughtful answer. I appreciate that. And so you can go back to your coffee sipping now.
back to work on a Sunday morning.
Well, that was certainly the angriest note we got. And we did get some very thoughtful ones too, including from our subscribers who did not pull their support, which I very appreciate. But I think one of the big excitements of having Irshad Manji join us as a fairly regular co-splainer, she was on the podcast we did some weeks ago, losing track of time. But it was called How to Talk to People You Hate. And Irshad has recently made a career. Her book was called Don't Label Me. But she is a compassionate, thoughtful, open-minded woman who is wonderful at facilitating conversation between people who occupy different sides. So again, as we approach this, what is going to be clearly a very fraught election season, we won't get into these nitty-gritty partisan issues, but it will be really, I'm just so thrilled to have Irshad alongside me. Okay, now, I don't know if those of you listen to the show where we had a young man, and it turns out just a very attractive young man, if we can say that without causing offense, write into us asking us to help him find a girlfriend who sort of is of the femsplainery mindset. And so we put his picture up on Facebook and Instagram. We put his dating profile, and we told anyone interested to write we created a new email called love@femsplainers.com. And we got some interesting responses, and he's going to reply to these women who wrote to him. And his picture is still up. I'm still undecided whether, this podcast should be pursuing something like a dating app. But I just like the idea that it would be wonderful if we could build some sort of community where young singles can meet each other. So any thoughts you have, just reach out to us at love@femsplainers.com. And if you missed Blair, just scroll back through our Instagram or our Facebook, and you will see his photo, and you can contact him. A couple funny remarks, though, that did come out on that is from a man named Justin, who he said, I would try to get featured, but the best I can offer is employed, have all my teeth, not on meth. Well, Justin, I think that makes you quite a catch. And lastly, speaking of Irshad, this came from Jacqueline on Facebook. She said, I've listened to the podcast with Irshad Manji 3 times now during the whole COVID pandemic, and it has given me much comfort and inspiration. Thank you. This is my favorite from that episode, pieced together from her interview. So Jacqueline actually wrote down a quote, and I think this is a lovely way to end the podcast and our summer season with this from Irshad. It says, put yourself in the shoes of people who do not yet hold your position. Let me ask you, how do you expect to win over the holdouts if, from listening to you, they say to themselves, wow, if this view is contemptuous of me as a human being, if it's divisive, if it's arrogant and self-righteous, count me out? My point being, when you listen to and get to know your other, you'll actually glean information from them that will help you reframe your argument in a way that the holdouts can finally hear. It's not about being nice for the sake of nice. It's about being smart. That was Irshad Manji. So as we end our summer season, we'll be back after Labor Day. Don't forget our subscribers at Patreon and Glow will get their bonus summer last call, featuring their questions to all our guests of the summer series, plus our newsletter. And when we return, we'll have our new lineup of co-splainers with Irshad, of course, and also Caitlin Flanagan and Meghan Cox Gurdon, whom you heard today. Plus, we'll have new guests, new topics, and so much more. We really appreciate it. Your support will keep us going. Check out, we've been uploading videos to our new YouTube channel, so you can actually watch some of these interviews or parts of these interviews, as well as listening to us. So have just a wonderful August under the circumstances. It's been a tough year for everybody, but we love being with you. We love having you as our listeners. We like spending time, and we like, honestly, just helping to distract you and take on issues that are important and interesting and also just sometimes fun. So take care, everybody. We'll see you after Labor Day. Bye.